Nia.
We have so many wonderful questions from our viewers today.
All right.
The first one is, you talk about how similar to when we wake up from a dream while we're asleep in physical reality, it is that when we die, we wake up from the physical back into who we are as a soul. From your perspective, does this process continue beyond that once we are awake as a soul, or are we totally awake? Do we wake up at some point from being a soul back to being an oversoul, or from an oversoul, and so on? How does it all work?
When you are a soul, you are totally awake as a soul. You can connect to the oversoul. You can start to experience points of view from the oversoul. The idea is not so much that you wake up as the oversoul, for both will exist simultaneously in the realm of spirit, in the realm of non-physical reality. But you can have experiences as if you are seeing from the oversoul perspective. You can have experiences as if you are seeing from higher perspectives, oversouls of oversouls, and even from the perspective of all that is. But it's not the same as waking up, because you haven't forgotten who you are. Exactly in the sense of the connection between soul, oversoul, oversouls of oversouls, and all that is. On that level, things start to exist more concretely in a simultaneous way, and you can have experiences of having the point of view and perspective of those other levels, but it's not the same as waking up to realize you are that.
Okay, and what happens to the soul when we physically die?
What do you mean? You become the soul. You are the soul. You wake up as the soul. Your body idea, your experience of physical reality remains within you as the soul. Remember, your body doesn't have a soul. Your soul has a body. So to ask what happens to the soul when we die is a question coming from the linear physical perspective, as if your body is, in a sense, more real than the soul. You are a soul, and when you die, in a sense, you absorb the experience you had within the soul of the physical being that you created within the soul. Again, similar to the idea of as you grow as an adult, you absorb the experience you had as a child. But you are now an adult. Yet you can call upon the experiences you've had as a child. So as a soul, you can call upon the experiences you had from the physical perspective, but all that happened within the soul.
Okay, and if we are all living past and future lives in the present moment, then why is it that when babies are born, they need to relearn how to be human? They need to relearn the simplest things like how to talk, count, and interact with people. It is like they are discovering the world for the first time, but it's not the first time because we have many lives before and after.
But it is the first time for that personality. Your sentence is mixing the idea of the physical persona and the soul's experience when you say we. So the idea is you are creating a new physical persona that is injecting itself into the experience of physical reality and choosing to forget who it is so it can rediscover who it is from a new point of view. So it is the first time for that personality, and there has to be that first time experience for that personality to absorb all of the belief systems that are representative of the challenges that the soul chose to face as that unique new personality from a linear perspective. So that's why you have to forget who you are as a soul, even though you may be able to access all sorts of incarnational experiences that coexist simultaneously from the soul perspective. From the physical perspective, this is you uniquely for the first time. And therefore you have to learn things in the way that it is relevant for that personality to learn how to talk and walk and reconnect to things in a way, or connect to things in a way for the first time, to satisfy what that physical personality's journey is all about, which is going to be completely different from any other personality's journey. So it has to build up from scratch.
And how can a person tell if it's their last lifetime on Earth?
You will make that decision when you are in spirit. You cannot necessarily know that decision now. You may feel that there is a good chance you might choose that when you are back in spirit, back as the soul. And therefore, as the soul, you may say, yes, that was it. And now I'm going to move on. But you will have discussions with your spirit guides and all sorts of other beings when you are in spirit. And really, you will not completely form that decision until you are in spirit. You don't know right now, from the physical perspective, what else the soul itself may choose to experience. So you have many choices, and yes, you don't have to reincarnate, so to speak, on Earth. You can choose other kinds of experiences. But again, you will make that decision when you are in spirit.
And does each oversoul have a higher mind similar to our individual higher mind? And is the higher mind of all oversouls God?
In a sense, yes. The higher mind of anything and everything is what you call God. Although, again, it's infinite and eternal. There is no end. And even the idea of all that is can have a higher mind of a multitude of all that is.
And is our soul our higher mind?
Yes, same thing. The
And do
soul
animals?
is the higher mind, because that is the portion that is still experiencing itself as spirit, as a soul. So that becomes the higher mind, the guide for the physical personality the soul has created within the center of its being.
And do animals have higher minds?
Yes, because animals have souls, and the soul is the higher mind.
How is an animal soul different from a human soul?
It's different in purpose, it's different in vibrational frequency, it's different in intention, it's different in focus. The energy is the same, the essence is the same, but the vibrational patterns that determine what it is are different. It's like saying electromagnetic energy, light, is light, whether it's visible light, invisible light, red, green, yellow, blue, whatever. It's all made of the same stuff, so to speak, but the different frequencies determine that it appears and presents itself as different in terms of its effect. So animal souls, human souls, all souls are in a sense made of the same stuff, the same energy, the same consciousness, the same extension of source, and all that is. But the frequencies that determine it is an animal as opposed to a human are different. It's a different color, so to speak.
Can animals become humans or vice versa after they die and return to the physical world?
There is a type of progression where, from your perspective, it can appear that an animal consciousness has evolved into expressing itself as something like a human consciousness. It is unlikely that human consciousness become animal consciousness in an incarnational sense. Human consciousness can perceive itself and experience itself as an animal consciousness, but not necessarily physiologically. It is something that happens on the spirit level, in the spirit realm, in a certain way that you can experience while you're physical, but it's not like you're actually incarnating as an animal physically.
And are there an infinite number of souls to match one for each parallel human individual?
Yes.
And if we create vibrational representations of other souls' energy, but are not actually interacting with those energies directly in the material world, how is it possible that we can interact with anyone but ourselves?
Because you're picking up on the vibrational frequency of another, and you are using that frequency in part to create or co-create the version that you're interacting with, made out of your energy. So when you make a simulation of another being, part of that simulation contains the frequency differences in that other being, so that they do in fact appear different to you. The fact that you can perceive them as a different person is the clue that you are utilizing some of their frequency to create that representation, even though you're creating it out of your own consciousness and out of your own energy in order to have something to interact with. So the differences, the fact that you see it as a different person, is representative that you are incorporating into that simulation some of their frequency to represent themselves that way.
Is it possible to fully experience ourselves as our higher selves?
Yes, when you die. But you can have a version of yourself by getting very close to the idea, in the same way we have expressed that we are quasi-physical. On the chart that we have given you for this particular transmission, you will see the idea on the right-hand side of the fourth density human, where the physical mind has expanded back closer to being the level of the soul. And then you see above that the version that represents non-physical reality experience as an astral form or a near-death experience form. We are in the middle between those two, where we are very close to the idea of being the astral form, the spirit form, but we still retain physical attributes. That's why we are quasi-physical. So we represent as best as possible the idea of our higher minds, the soul, in physical terms by being quasi-physical, by having attributes of both the soul level and the physical level in a balanced and blended way. That's how you do it. It's not exactly the identical experience of being the soul, but it is a very close representation while still experiencing yourself to some degree as physical.
And can soul fragments from the same higher self or oversoul be family members? For example, can cousins be soul fragments from the same higher self?
There's no such thing as soul fragments. There are souls. If you're calling a fragment one of the souls that is connected to an oversoul, well, all right, then we understand your terminology. But there are no soul fragments. Souls are whole beings.
Okay, and is it true that twins have the same oversoul?
They can, they don't have to, but they can. It may be very likely, but it doesn't have to be absolute.
In the case of identical versus fraternal, is there any difference regarding oversoul
It is more
connection?
likely that identical might be extensions of the same oversoul. Again, it's not an absolute. And it might be more likely that twins that are only fraternal and not identical might still be extensions of the same oversoul, or more likely extensions of different oversouls for different reasons. But again, you have to take it on a case-by-case basis. Both are possible, but it's not an absolute. It depends on the purpose for the creation of the reflection of the twin or the triplet or what have you.
So I'm coming back to the idea of soul fragments. So there is no such thing as a soul fragment?
No. If you're referring to a soul fragment as simply one of the souls that make up an oversoul, then again, we understand the way you're using that terminology. But there is no such thing, aside from that expression, as a soul fragment. Souls are whole beings. There is no fragment of a soul.
Okay. And if this person's saying they know they're a soul with a body, but is it possible for an oversoul to have many different bodies?
Well, yes, that's exactly what an oversoul does. An oversoul has many different souls, and each soul can have an incarnational physical experience or a body. That's exactly the description of the idea of how the oversoul experiences itself, because many of the souls that make it up may choose to have incarnations in different places and different times, and all of that experience as physical beings feeds back through the soul to the oversoul. that is having all those experiences at the same time.
And this person would love to know what determines the oversoul group that we end up being in. Also, once an oversoul group, is manifest, do we remain in that group permanently?
Yes, you don't end up being in an oversoul. You start out that way. That's who you are. You're part of that vibration. You're part of that larger aspect of all that is. And then as an individual soul, you are an extension of that oversoul. That's who you are. You don't end up being there.
And how common is it for people with the same oversoul to meet in the same lifetime?
It's quite common. There can be many counterparts that will cross paths with each other, maybe interact with each other in a variety of different ways. Again, it depends upon the purpose for such an interaction. So I'm not saying it happens all the time, but it's quite common.
And how do you explain the concept of souls parallel life experiences impacting our current life journey? And what implications does this have on the infinite potential of our souls?
Well, again, this is what we've talked about many times when you talk about the idea of incarnations, past, present, future, where you're making cross connections energetically, informationally, sharing that information between different experiences that all coexist simultaneously, whether they seem to be in your historical timeline or in a parallel reality, doesn't matter. You connect to what you need to connect to draw information and experience from what serves your particular life path. So you're always plugging into and unplugging from different experiences in parallel realities to inform your life path, as other beings are doing for you, plugging into you to draw down your experience and information into them to help them with their life path, because it's just like one giant dynamic interactive internet. You're constantly sending and receiving information to different versions of extensions of different souls and parallel realities and what have you, in order to inform your path while you help others inform their path.
And does the higher mind or soul take feedback from the physical mind or the personality? For example, if someone is done and they've changed their mind about exploring something because it's actually more painful than they anticipated, can they terminate the agreement? And how can they do that?
No, you cannot terminate an agreement. You can postpone it, you can delay it, you cannot terminate it. An agreement is something that, in a sense, is part of your experience as a soul, that makes you unique, that makes you what you are. So when you have set up within yourself the parameters that allow you to experience parts of who you are, you cannot terminate that, because it would be like terminating a part of yourself, and you can't do that ultimately. You can postpone it. You can decide to leave physical reality before your prescribed time, the time that you originally set up, your end point, your exit point, because that's what you call suicide, when you leave early. But then you realize, when you go back into the soul form, that you were not finished with the agreement you made to be you in that way, to learn that thing that actually allows you to grow as a soul, as the soul you are, the unique soul you are. So you cannot change that. So you will perhaps postpone it. You may linger for a while and experience different things as a soul, non-physically, but then you will realize that in order to progress, in order to move forward, in order to grow, in order to change, you will, in some way, shape, or form, need to fulfill the parameters of that agreement, or you will not move forward. And not moving forward and not growing will at some point be such a strong and powerful urge within you, because of the nature of existence to expand, that you will finally decide in some way, shape, or form to continue to fulfill that agreement until you fulfill it. So you cannot erase it, but you can postpone it.
And Since we have a body within our consciousness, is everything around you or me my consciousness? Is this an independent experience with the other being me too, or my version of them?
Well, yes,
How
your
far
version of
around
them.
me?
Your version of them.
Says, how far around me does my consciousness expand?
All your consciousness around you. That's what you experience. We used the analogy of the idea of projecting onto the inner surface of the soul that you're within, because your physical mind is within the soul. So if you imagine the soul as a sphere of energy that has an inner surface and you're at the center of it, then you project like a screen. This is just a euphemism, it's just a metaphor. You project the idea on the inner surface of the sphere that you are at the center of. So your consciousness, your reflection of physical reality, is all around you. That's all you experience. But that means you're experiencing your version of other beings, other souls, who are experiencing you as their version of you projected on the inner surface of their soul sphere, so to speak. This is just a crude, simplistic analogy. But again, it doesn't mean you're not interacting with other beings. That takes place on a different level. But you're creating, as a physical mind, all of those interactions out of your own energy, because you are at the center of your soul sphere, projecting it on the inner surface of that sphere, euphemistically speaking.
It's interesting because what you've described is very similar to what a person experiences inside of the sphere in Las Vegas.
Yes. That's why, again, you create these things to represent what's actually going on in reality, and your culture chooses to create representations of that idea. As you open your consciousness up, it's reflected in your technology all the time, in your culture, in your stories, so on and so forth.
Fascinating.
Yes.
Is it correct that some souls incarnate on Earth compulsorily? And how does this come to be specifically? How does free will relate to this?
You always have free will as a soul. It's not compulsive. You choose to incarnate. Now, you may feel as a soul, so to speak, that it's important for you to do so. And if you want to call that a compulsion because you know that that's going to really help your soul grow and you are really driven to do that, well, fine. Then that can be, in a sense, a compulsion. But it's not something that is compulsive. You have a choice.
Can entities interfere with the communication between the triad mind? And if so, what are some of the common reasons why this interference takes place?
No, there's no such thing as that kind of interference in the way that you mean it. Again, you can choose to change your vibrational frequency to match frequencies of other beings, and in that way you're influencing yourself in a way that makes it appear as if it might be coming from another being, but it's your own energy at a certain frequency that is experienced as interference, but it's not actually possible for another entity to interfere.
Okay, and this person is asking, how can I become an oversoul if I'm an individual soul now?
You can't. You are an individual soul. You are part of an oversoul. Again, in spirit, you can have the experience of perceiving yourself as an oversoul, but the oversoul exists at the same time that your soul does. So you don't become an oversoul. You simply have the ability to experience yourself from the oversoul perspective as a soul.
Okay. And this person is saying that they believe that nothing can affect them in a negative way unless they are a match to that energy. Is that a true belief?
Yes, if you actually believe it. You know it. You understand it. That's the way things work. Nothing can affect you that you don't choose to be affected by. And that's why it's so important to get into touch with the beliefs about why you believe it might be necessary to change your frequency to make it appear as if you're being affected negatively by something else.
And does that sort of relate to the question the individual had about changing their life theme that they were experiencing in a painful way because they decided that the path they had chosen for this life was too painful? Is that also an answer to that issue of
Yes.
experiencing life in a painful way, wanting to
Yes.
escape it?
Yes. Now
And
remember, remember, the only reason life appears too painful is because of the belief systems you're holding on to that make it so. The journey, the path that every soul chooses is never actually too much to bear. It is something you have chosen for your soul's growth, to transform, to experience, to challenge yourself with. The only way it starts to appear to be too much to bear is because you're not allowing your belief system to align with your core frequency in a way that lets you know that you can handle the challenges you chose to face from the soul's perspective. So it is up to the physical mind and the belief system that makes up the physical mind to alter its beliefs in such a way as to experience that the challenges the soul chose are not something that is too much to bear. You can handle it if you align your beliefs to your core frequency. If you let go of those beliefs that are negative and fear-based, you will be a match for the soul's path that the soul chose. It only becomes overwhelming when you have beliefs that are contrary to your core frequency as a being, as a soul.
this person wants to know if you think that any of us, or even just some of us, can accomplish the elevating or raising of our vibration that you so strongly advocate and suggest. What are your thoughts on our current procedure?
Yes, of course you can. Otherwise, it would be pointless for us to share this information with you. Therefore, we wouldn't do it. So the fact that we are sharing this information is a representation of the principle of the one-sided coin that we've talked about many times. It is our passion and our pleasure to share this information with you, which tells us that there are some individuals who are more than capable of receiving and absorbing and applying this information in a way that they can raise their vibration and have the experiences that we are talking about. Otherwise, it would be pointless for us to share this information. And we would then feel that it was pointless, know that it was pointless, and wouldn't share it. So the fact that we're sharing it should be your first clue that it is attainable. But it's up to you to attain it. You don't have to, but it is attainable. Otherwise, it wouldn't be given. So where are you at? Where you are at individually is up to you. Are you following the formula? Are you letting go of fear-based and negative beliefs, thus raising your vibration? You're the determiner of that. You're the determiner of where you're at. Obviously, enough of you are moving up, are raising your frequency in a way that allows us to see that we can continue to deliver new information, new perspectives, new insights, that we can continue to talk about the idea of the highest probability of open contact occurring in your lifetime very quickly. Otherwise, again, we would be talking about different things if we were talking to you at all. So you can use what we're sharing with you, the idea of the Interstellar Alliance social experiment, one example of that, showing you that you are progressing, or at least some of you are. So use what we're sharing with you as an indicator that you're progressing, if you are even aware of what we're sharing with you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be aware of it.
And since we cannot perceive what we are not the vibration of, how can we reach a person or entity with higher truths for help when we are in a very low state?
If you do reach the person, if you do reach the help, if you do match it, if you do have the ability to encounter it, then it means a part of the mix of your frequency contains the ability to do that, even though overall you might be functioning at a lower frequency. So you always contain the potential for that frequency to show itself and to access the information that you need. Remember that as physical beings, you are compartmentalized in many ways in your consciousness. Therefore, that may mean that there are still parts of your consciousness that are capable of operating on a higher frequency, even though it may not be the majority of those parts of your consciousness, but sufficient enough to reach out for and receive the assistance that other beings of higher frequency are sending to you.
Okay, and how do you combine genuine service to others with our unchangeable motivational mechanism, i.e., the mechanism that says we will always do things that are move towards what's good for us and away from the things we perceive as being not good for us?
All right, well, that is not worded correctly. The motivational mechanism doesn't make you move toward things that are good for you. It makes you move toward things you believe are good for you. Big difference. Big difference. Belief is the key. So you may not move toward things that are good for you because you have a belief that the alternative is worse. So pay attention to the idea of how the motivational mechanism actually works. It doesn't make you move toward things that are good for you. It makes you move toward things you believe are good for you, which may not be the case. So you have to have real honesty within yourself about why you are choosing what you're choosing and whether you're really choosing it out of anxiety or excitement and covering up the anxiety with what seems to be excitement so you don't have to look at the anxiety, so that you don't have to face the idea that you may be holding on to a belief that choosing what is actually good for you would actually make something happen that is worse than what you're choosing now, even though it may not necessarily be in your best interest. So be clear in your understanding of how the motivational mechanism actually functions.
And so this person is mentioning that they think they understand the formula, but one part of it is still unclear. And that is, how does the formula tie in with good habits, discipline, and on a larger scale, routines, structures, jobs? Does following one's excitement mean disregarding all structures and routines? Is the formula inherently spontaneous and impulsive?
No. As I say, the formula contains the organizing principle of synchronicity. The organizing principle, that phrase alone implies structure. But it's the structure that works for you. It's the structure that allows you to flow. It's a structure, paradoxically, that allows for spontaneity. But it is still a pattern. It's still a structure. But it feels less like a structure because you're flowing within a structure that's natural for you. So you don't feel the resistances that often come with the artificial structures you impose on yourselves that are not natural for who you are. That's why it doesn't feel like a structure, because it's the structure that fits you.
Okay, thank you. And how do I find the purpose of my life? How do I find my excitement?
As I said, you can start small. The fact that you're asking that question is a representation that you have found your excitement for that moment, because obviously it was more exciting than any other choice to ask that question. So you can do the same thing in the next moment. What's the next thing that has a little bit more excitement, curiosity, attractiveness than any other choice? Start simply. Keep it simple. Again, when we talk about finding your passion and your excitement, we don't mean that you have to be jumping up and down and running around like crazy. It doesn't mean it has to come with trumpets and angels singing. It means, what's the next thing I have the ability to act on that has more attractiveness than any other choice? That's simple. taking a walk, reading a book, eating a meal, talking to a friend, creating something, whatever it is, asking a question of someone like you just did, whatever it is that has more attractiveness, that feels like the next thing you really, really feel like doing, do it and keep doing that. It will build, it will snowball into other expressions of your excitement, as long as you keep checking yourself to make sure that you're actually acting on excitement and not acting on anxiety disguised as excitement.
And this idea of the end justifying the means, and that would be that it seems like the higher mind has an attitude of the ends justify the means. So for people with especially hard themes, that includes a total forgetting of any spiritual truths. What are your thoughts on this?
It's not that the higher mind has an end justifies the means position. That's a human interpretation. The idea is the soul understands what it's going to get out of the experience and is doing its job of guiding the physical mind within it in such a way as to send it the guidance it needs in order for the physical mind to have an experience that allows it to face challenges that are beneficial to it, to allow it to expand, to allow it to grow, to allow it to have a fulfilling and joyful life experience. The only reason it appears as if the end justifies the means is because of the perspective of the physical mind that is harboring and holding on to belief systems that are out of alignment with its core frequency. So, the idea that it seems too hard to bear, as we discussed already, comes from the linear perspective, not from the soul perspective. The soul is doing its best to send you messages of passion, but the physical mind has the ability and the free will to ignore it. And it is in ignoring that guidance from the soul that the physical mind then says, oh, this looks like the end justifies the means because I am being subjected to these horrible, torturous experiences, instead of allowing yourself to understand what we have shared with you about the formula that allows you to remain in a positive state no matter what happens, so you can always get a benefit from it. That's why that step is in there, so that you can understand how this works, so that you can experience a life of challenge in a positive way that allows you to expand and experience the benefits of facing those challenges, rather than feeling overwhelmed or feeling that the soul is somehow torturing you by putting you in a situation that's too much for you. It's not. You're putting yourself in the situation that makes it appear to be too much for you by not following the formula, by not opening up to the idea that challenges can be positive, by not feeling worthy, by forgetting who you are. That's what the soul may have chosen to start with, but it has always given you the opportunity to pay attention to what you can actually use to go through the experience from beginning to end that actually will help you learn and grow and experience a life of fulfillment and joy.
And when you see things on a screen, let's say that synchronistically are an important message, like from the lyrics of a song or anything related to sudden communication coming in written form like that on a screen, do the souls that are generating that information know that they are delivering that information to you? And are their souls literally trying to communicate and encourage me?
Yes. It could be your own soul, could be your own higher mind, but it can also be your spirit guides, members of your soul family, members of the angelic realm, other ETs, other dimensionals that are using synchronicity to deliver information that will help you. So yes, it's a deliberate act of connection and communication from whatever the source is to help you out. The fact that you experience the synchronicity means it is for you. Now, synchronicities can be holographically multidimensional, and synchronicities can serve many different people simultaneously. If more than one person is experiencing the synchronicity, there may be messages in there for all the people experiencing it. And that, again, is a deliberate act that may be coming from many different sources in a multidimensional way. But the bottom line is, yes, it's a message for you.
And so when you are, or an individual is hearing information from another person, and they're seeing that the person is giving them a nonsensical belief, but they're buying into it, but the individual listening is buying into it, is a result of not knowing themselves that they
Yes.
would do that?
Yes. That's why it's so important to know yourself, to know what is truly working for you and what is not, to take what advice allows you to grow and be self-empowered, and leave behind those things that don't. It's learning that discernment. That's one of the lessons of physical reality, learning what is and isn't truly you. And that's why you can always use what isn't you to help you understand more clearly what is you.
And why are we experiencing this physical form? Can we experience similar limitations in another form? Why this one now?
There are some other forms in which you can experience the idea of limitations, but as we have said, the Earth cycles is one of the more concentrated places to experience this idea of limitation. And therefore it means, as we have said, it's a master graduating class. You have decided to take a class that allows you to really stretch and exercise the powers you know you have accumulated in the growth of the soul up to this point. So in other words, you don't choose to stay in kindergarten or first grade forever. You say, all right, let's move on to the second grade and the third grade and the fourth grade. I'm going to learn more. I'm going to push myself. I'm going to challenge myself. Otherwise, it would be, quote unquote, boring to do the same thing over and over again. Let's see, where can I find something that's a real interesting challenge? Oh, look at what's going on Earth. Let's do that. We're ready for that. We're ready to really accelerate our growth. We're really ready to learn some interesting things because that's the school that offers it. That's why people choose to go to college. That's why people choose to have master's degrees, PhDs. They want to continue to learn and grow and stretch and expand. Earth is one of those places where you can really do some expanding if you get the point, if you learn what the class is all about, if you're willing to learn the lesson.
When the Earth School began, for humans, I suppose,
Yes.
how did that whole thing get created? Was that like a convergence of a multitude of consciousnesses
Yes.
coming together and thinking this up, or as a
Yes.
continuation of a whole
Yes.
galactic story? Is that
Yes. 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 Groups of individuals, groups of souls, councils of souls, soul families, everyone participates in the creation of an experience like a planet called Earth and similar planets and all planets. It is created on a very high level by consensus through different groups of souls as to what would be interesting and exciting for the souls to experience to continue the idea of their expansion and their growth. Yes, it's a part of the evolution of existence itself. Souls come together on different levels, in different frequencies, and they agree to create these things. Just like someone might decide to come together to create a theme park. Well, I need these people to come together. I need those people that know how to do that to come in. We need these souls to come in who know how to do that and suggest this and suggest that. And before you know it, there it is. And now we can all share in it.
and it seems like the prime directive that souls experience, in a sense, is the idea of expansion, growth.
Yes.
This seems to be the most fundamental desire, I guess, of the
It is the impetus of existence. You have to understand what infinite actually means. Infinity has a momentum. So the idea is that existence itself provides the momentum by its very existence to continue to fill infinity. It's attempting to be all that it is. That attempt to be all that it is. It is all that is, but it also contains the attempt to be all that it is. That's the active principle. So there's the structure, and then there's the active principle. That's why you see in our family sigil the triskelion, the triangle with the spiral in it. There is the structure represented by the triangle, but there is the active principle. That's what you call the act of creation, the act of being. So that creates that sensation, that momentum, that urge, that drive, that desire to fill it all up, to fill infinity, to know yourself on every possible level. And it's infinite. So it's that drive to know yourself, to be yourself, and the act of becoming and being yourself that continues that expansion. It's the nature. It's the active nature. It's the active nature of existence. There's the structural nature of existence and the active nature of existence, what you call creation.
So, like you've described in the past, I guess the idea of terraforming planets and moving planets, that level of consciousness that's capable of things that
Yes.
are beyond, in our minds, beyond our wildest dreams of what is possible.
Well, there are levels to that idea. There can be terraforming projects, as you call it, that can take a planet body, a form that already exists, and convert it through technology to something that might be more compatible to certain forms of life. That's one level of it. What we were talking about is the actual creation of an experience going from the spirit level into the physical level on a huge consensus level reality of co-creation by many different souls, to actually bring the very idea of the planet into physical existence in much the same way that you bring the physical mind into existence at the center of the soul. So there is a consensus level on a greater level, again, greater than even what you typically refer to as the oversoul. That's an oversoul of oversouls of oversouls that actually comes together to create within the center of its being a physical experience that contains the experience of many souls on what you call a planet. It's a larger version, a much larger version of creating a single physical identity. It's a consensus identity within a much larger oversoul. That's what a planet is. A consensus identity of many souls within an amazingly large oversoul consciousness at the center of its being.
It's amazing.
Yes.
So we have some questions that relate to the Interstellar Alliance ID card.
Yes.
One of them was, what do the 5 stars on the Interstellar Alliance ID card represent?
The 5 hybrid races that already exist.
And you provided that as step 4. Is it okay to translate the words on the card into a foreign language so they can use the card more easily in areas where English is not native?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And since the Greys initiated the hybrid agenda together with the Mantids, resulting in the Sasani, Yael, and other races with open contact in its final stages, it would seem that the role of the Greys themselves would be over. Yet many contactees still feel an active connection and interest in them in particular, in their particular Grey counterparts, even today. And what are these Grey counterparts seeking to experience in the unfolding of open contact? which they themselves initiated so long ago through their
We
own
must remind you, we must remind you to stop talking about the Greys as if there's only one single faction. There are many factions of Greys. The different factions have different agendas, come from different places, different times, different parallel realities, and are at different stages of the entire process, even though they may be interacting with your planet or different versions of it. So you are experiencing, based on your vibration, different stages of the idea of interactions with Greys, different points in their evolution, and therefore it depends upon what's going on in your vibration that will determine what faction of Greys you may still or not be still interacting with. That's all we can say right now about that. But don't treat the Greys as if there's only one faction that you're dealing with.
Okay, and this person says they were told that reptilian beings are dangerous in the Sedona area at this time. Is
No,
that
no,
accurate?
no. It is not correct.
Okay. Are there a lot of misunderstandings about, I guess, reptilians, and are
Yes,
they
as I've said
are they
before, they are a certain kind of species that invokes in the limbic system of your physical brain the idea of a fight or flight response because of the nature of their vibration, because you look at them as predatory, because that's the way you relate to the idea of reptilian DNA. And therefore, humans, mammalians, have a fight or flight survival fear-based response to exposure to the reptilian vibration. It doesn't mean they actually intend to do you harm. It's just the nature of their frequency as it relates to the nature of the mammalian frequency that represent human beings.
okay? And this person is saying, let's say I experience open contact 3 to 6 years from now. Will I be able to learn specialty skills from members of the Interstellar Alliance, for example, as a different form of higher education? How might one then be able to use those skills on Earth?
Well, yes, of course, that's going to be possible. And of course, you will be learning things that obviously will be applicable to Earth society. So when you choose a subject, then you will understand how it is applicable on Earth.
Okay, and this person is saying they would like to know, how does one know the difference between what the higher mind is advising versus what the physical mind is thinking? Basically, how do we distinguish the voices in our head and know which path to follow?
Well, again, the higher mind doesn't usually come as a voice in your head, although it can. It's more about the idea of, again, seeing the reflection in a situation, in a circumstance, in an opportunity that is filled with excitement, curiosity, attractiveness, and passion. That's the way that the higher mind communicates with the physical mind. You translate its messages into the sensation called passion, curiosity, excitement, attraction. It's different than the idea of what the physical mind thinks about it. That's a reflective reaction. Because again, thinking and thought patterns come from the beliefs in the physical mind. If you let yourself feel in your heart what it is you are truly excited about being and doing, that is more representative of a communication from the higher mind, as opposed to the idea of the thinking thought patterns that the physical mind exhibits about what the higher mind has sent it.
Okay, and this person is saying, to be honest, I'm not sure that the idea of open contact will really manifest in my reality because I have never particularly been interested in UFOs or aliens. However, since embarking on a spiritual path as a natural progression of life events, I came across your material, and some of what you say really resonates with me, or as you put it, strikes a chord. I wanted to ask if you represent a certain high vibration within me that has manifested you in my reality, or in other words, if you're an aspect of my multidimensionality that we share, regardless of the ideas of open contact UFOs or aliens.
Yes, because again, first and foremost, we are functioning as a reflection of your own higher mind, of your own soul. That doesn't require the idea of extraterrestrial contact to take advantage of. That's first and foremost. It can lead more easily to the idea of open contact to allow your own physical mind to connect more strongly with your higher mind, your soul. But that's the first step, is a representation of your own higher mind. That's how we function. Now, the fact that you're asking the question of an extraterrestrial can be an indication that it is a high probability that this will lead to some form of contact. But no, it doesn't have to. The most important thing is that it helps you understand how to communicate with your own higher mind to interact with us.
And how would you compare the idea of having an interdimensional communication or encounter with another being versus ET contact?
Well, again, it's not always important to tell the difference if the information services you in a way, helps you in a way. Sometimes when you become sensitive enough, you might be able to feel the difference in vibration, and you can assign that particular feeling to an extra dimensional or extraterrestrial or spirit guide or something like that. But it's not always important to make that distinction if the information itself is what's more important to focus on.
So the whole idea of as we raise our vibration, ET contact becomes a side effect in a sense.
Yes.
Because now you have access to more of things in existence.
Yes, let me give you a very simplistic example. Let's say someone is living in your United States and they decide they're going to move to France. Well, of course, once they move to France, they have surrounded themselves with more opportunities to interact with French things. It's a side effect of the move, of where it is they chose to move. So when you raise your vibration, it's like moving to another country. And the things that are relevant for experiencing in that country happen as the natural side effects, because those are the things that happen in that country. So certain things happen in higher frequency realities than happen in other frequency realities. You will experience all the things that are relevant for that higher frequency reality when you decide to move there.
And this person is saying they're new to joining the social experiment, and would you recommend that we start doing steps 1 through 4 all at the same time, or should we pace ourselves using the same timing in which you originally presented the steps, starting with step 1 and then adding on a step per month?
It's completely up to you. Either can work.
And there are some other Sasani channels who are also speaking of the Interstellar Alliance and a version of the steps which you are giving us. And I will be following your instructions, but why would they be telling us something a bit different?
Different people need to hear things in different ways and may need to take slightly different steps or different versions of the steps because it fits their belief system a little bit differently. So we will give you all the choices, multidimensional, holographically, all the different ways in which the steps can be done based on the different belief systems, the different styles of approach, the different way you absorb information, the different ways you interpret things based on your belief systems and your life experiences. So sometimes a step has to be altered slightly for this belief system and cultural experience. Sometimes it has to be altered slightly for this different belief system and cultural experience. Essentially, they'll all get you to the same basic place.
Okay. And is there anything else you would like to add as far as the social experiment and those ideas as we end our question session?
The next step will be given in the next transmission, step 5. We will talk about it in the next transmission. It will be about the idea of opening up to volunteering and being of service in that particular way to your society. We thank you Yes, we thank you. And now allow yourselves to prepare to focus on the idea of the soul's journey, the soul cycle. Become relaxed and continue to receive this information in the way that works best for you. And now we would like to invite everyone to become relaxed, to breathe deeply and easily, to add whatever